Can you hear me? Okay, cool. Awesome. Hello, everybody. Thank you, Kat. Thank you for the introduction. And yeah, as Kat said in the introduction, today's performance is gonna be it's called Closing the Open Studio. And for one, I'm just gonna perform live as this like artist villager characters to start the deinstallation and deconstruction of my exhibition in the server. And it's also gonna start this like as you may know, like for during the whole period of the exhibition, I developed a spreadsheet of documenting what I've been doing on Minecraft and learning how to be an artist. So this is also going to start a new section on the spreadsheet called the installation slash deconstruction of the exhibition. And it's going to last till the last day of my exhibition period, which is going to be end of this month. So okay, before I started to actually deconstruct or like started to um, break the blocks of my work on the server, I would like to read a passage, read a text, and this text is the following passage I'm going to read is from Hilary Sample's book Maintenance Architecture, published by the MIT Press in 2016. Maintenance. The fact is that the street cleaners are welcome like angels, and their task of removing the residue of yesterday's existence is surrounded by a respectful silence, like a ritual that inspires devotion, perhaps only because when things have been cast off, nobody wants to have to think about them further. Nobody wonders where each day they carry their load of refuse outside the city, surely, but each day the city expands and the street cleaners had to fall further back. The bulk of the overflow increases and the piles raise higher, become, become stratified, extend over a wider perimeter. Italo Calvino, Invisible Cities. Maintenance is a public art, not a private one, and the perceived distance between the architect and the public maintenance worker is much greater than the reality. Large-scale public maintenance practices have become professionalized, and maintenance workers tend to be viewed as a necessary service. The architect, alongside the client and developer, determines the type of work and labor performance required. Contemporary artists are concerned with the issue of maintenance, maybe more so than architects. This concern reflects their interest in the real and the representational and the collapse of these two worlds into one reproduction or project. In her essay Styles of Radical Will, critic Susan Sontag writes, the systematic violation of older formal conventions practiced by modern artists give their work a certain aura of the unspeakable. For instance, as the audience uneasily senses the negative presence of what else could be, but isn't being said. Artists give an oddly uncomfortable portrait of maintenance, increasingly affirming the irony of the modern project. This portrait undoes and unnerves architectural discourse. To discuss the subject of maintenance forces us to question architecture as a singular, formalized, and fixed object. Architecture is a reservoir of weather, nature, and elements, whose factors constantly change its properties. Even as architecture remains vertical or standing, it changed in perpetuity. Clean look buildings are a social commodity, and architecture is generally considered a luxury. The inability to make visible acts of maintenance is thus a failure of architecture. If, as Calvino says, the maintenance worker's existence is surrounded by a respectful silence, it is possible to imagine a cold kind of silence that makes up the space surrounding the window washer, particularly further up, away from the street. not only silence, but stillness. The notion that human has to exert enormous amount of effort to scale and clean buildings produces a perverse landscape much akin to Sontag's discussion of pornography. The fantastic enlargements of human energy are rather the ingredients of another kind of literature founded on another of consciousness. According to this logic, maintenance belongs not only to architecture but also to social affairs, psychology, metaphysics, and so on. It offers the desire to enter other worlds in strangers' home or at great heights. Architecture can be dishonest. Maintenance is obscene. Maintenance renders architecture conventional. Maintenance is love. Maintenance is beyond love. Maintenance is a consciousness. Maintenance is fulfillment. Maintenance is agony. Maintenance has power over architecture. Architecture has little power over maintenance. Maintenance confronts different skills. Maintenance represents architecture. Maintenance contradicts architecture. Finance is maintenance. That's the end of this article. And now I'm going to start to deconstruct my work in silence. Ooh. Mm. Mm-hmm.
Hello. Hello again.
Hello. Hello again.
Hello.
So, Huidi, that was, thank you for the beginning of this deconstruction effort, this a bit of visual and audio ASMR for those tuning in live stream. I'm curious about, I have a few questions, and audience members are welcome to throw in their questions as well, and we'll read them out loud to the
Mm-hmm.
chat. But I am curious, kind of relating this practice of um, maintenance work to a digital space. Oh yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, throw questions can also go in the server chat as well. Um, it's really interesting in the context. Oops. Oh, thank you, John. We'll just check our levels.
I have it boosted over, so listening on Discord would be a bit harder probably.
But we'll solve those for the folks listening on Discord, and I'll continue for those listening on stream. But yeah, this as a space that you can reset or you can respawn this world. What were your decisions leading you to decide that you wanted to restore by hand this digital space to its original algorithmically generated state?
Mm. I think for me, I guess I just like in general really like curious about how that happened. Like I just feel like especially then I think it's okay, so the starting point of me trying to do this performance or like this action or event or whatever, I think it started from my primary practice as a sculptor. I'm like working with physical space and physical objects. So I usually just like open my show and people came, and then after the closing of the exhibition we usually have to work with the gallery or the space to like restore the space and deinstall the work. And but that kind of labor or like that kind of things always happen behind scene, right? Like the audience never got to see it. And next day or like next after a period of time of like the closing period of like the space, and the space got restarted and becomes like a new space ready for another round of exhibition or like the new work to be installed inside of it. And I'm always really interested in that kind of like a behind scene moment, like or like this behind scene appear every time, because it's also contains this like intense of labor happening not on stage, like happening in that like little almost like a little black boxes, that little black box. So when I started to work with Minecraft, and I realized, oh, actually, it's really, especially when I transit from the residency server to the exhibition server, and I know like one day we can just like reset the residency server from my residency to the next for to reset that like for the next resident. And so at that moment I started to thinking about it, this kind of like a whole reset moment. I didn't actually join that moment. I think Sarah did the reset like server process, and she just sent me this like backup file of my residency server. And I just find this really interesting, like that folder just contain everything, and how, and I imagine like how Sarah like reset the whole thing. Um, so that got me to started to really find it really fascinating, even though we are like thinking about in Minecraft or in digital space, it's all like you just push the button and you reset it, or like or just like put on some commands inside of the game, it will reset the whole thing. But it also kind of has the parallel with the what I described in the physical space. It's like we just close the door and something happening in the backstage or something happening in the black box, and the whole world reset. So I'm also, so I guess it's just like really interesting, this kind of like an invisible process or like the invisible things happening behind what we are seeing as gamer or as artist or as creator in the game world. So that's the moment I'm like, okay, I think I wanted to explore this as an artist actually working in Minecraft, because I think it's also a really important part of being an artist in Minecraft. Right? My project's all about learn how to be an artist. So I think not only I need to know how I actually create the world or like create everything in the world, I also need to know like how I can deconstruct the thing or like deinstall the thing or restore the things back to the new space, like ready for next thing, or it's like ready for, I don't know, for what comes next. I think it's also like a part of like experience or a part of lesson I need to learn as an artist in the digital space. um so yeah, I don't know, it's just coming from this I guess it's like mainly coming from this kind of curiosity about the how to reset a world in a digital space.
Yes, and so the kind of that resetting or that cleaning and maintenance of digital spaces is really interesting, in how there are these similarities and stark differences in like the preparation for a physical exhibition versus digital exhibition. Something that people who work on platforms show their work on platforms might be familiar with is coming up against content moderation.
Mhm.
People who work in photography and perhaps have include nude photography within that, of course, finding their projects flagged on like Facebook or Instagram or something. Um, and that being a practice that's both done by people as well as by algorithms. How
Sure.
does like the intervention of the integration of the algorithm into that moderation and actually that maintenance practice impact this kind of maintenance labor politics that you're considering with the Hillary sample text?
Mhm. I think it's really interesting because I've been thinking this a lot. I'm like, okay, so when I'm like reset the world uh, from that that sense, I don't think it's like, oh, we just delete everything, right? It's the action of deconstruct the or like a break the break the blocks is actually create another line of data or like create another line of the thing inside of the game. It's never like we just delete it and we just like delete the thing we have created. It's almost like we create a new world inside of the game. So it's like actually it's I think it's actually like for example like what one time when I did a show, I painted the wall into yellow and then I have to repaint it back to white. So it's not like I just get rid of the yellow paint. I actually paint like 2 layers of white paint on top of it to cover that yellow paint. So it's actually have like 3 layers of new paint. It just looks like a original state or like the initial state of that. So I'm like thinking about me inside of the game. From this interface, I feel like okay, I'm just destroy everything I created in the game. So it feels like I'm subtract things from the world I've been created, but from the algorithm or like from the backstage, it looks like it just create more and more data inside of the game actually. So it's like it's just almost like a doubling the labor instead of just like okay, I have this set of data, I just destroyed it, but through like the deinstill like deconstruct the world, I'm actually creating a new world which just looks like or just simulated the world I before I enter. So I think that's really interesting, and so that's also like making me to thinking about this idea of like um uh maintenance or like the labor of caring or like labor of like trying to restoring something, and we always feel like it's just like this labor is trying to throw something or like trying to like get something back to this like the labor of restoration, but in a lot of sense it's not. It's like also a creation. It's like a create a new world, like a create a something or like trying to capture the time. Like I think that's really, for me, that's really powerful, and for me it's also get me really curious about this, and I feel like the algorithm is when I'm thinking about the things from a digital space and started thinking about that thing from the algorithm perspective, I started to realize, okay, it's not just about trying to pause something, trying to make something stop, or trying to keep something, or even trying to restore something. It's always about creating things and put the efforts inside of it, put the energy of it inside of it, and that's really important and that's really powerful. I guess that's the lesson I learned from this kind of like a combination between my own physical labor as well as the perspective of the digital space as well as the game. Like I think previously when I solely work with physical space, I didn't really think about this problem from the like or this issue from this perspective. I always just feel like, okay, I'm just trying to bring something back to what it was, but it's actually through maintenance or like through caring where like bring something to what it will be. I don't know whether that does that answer the questions or does that make any sense, but that's what I'm thinking about.
Well, it's interesting in the case of like famous degraded servers, like specifically thinking about the relationship of maintenance in Minecraft in the sort of way that you're envisioning it, these actions to restore it. Like the 2B2T server, where really people are going to this space or trying to get into this space because it's so destroyed and it's so visually incoherent with what we're familiar with as Minecraft. There's just these exploded blocks everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of consideration of that being actually a draw, that complete degradation and that lack of maintenance and that chaos and entropy, whatever that the people who are visiting it are coming for. How does that, when you think about a space like that, a digital space like that being so interesting to folks, how does that factor into this like this politics of digital maintenance that you're interested in with your own server, the exhibition server, that is?
I think that's a really interesting question. I'm also thinking about that, and I'm also thinking about like in art. I think properly related to that, this idea of like as aestheticization of the degraded digital space, or it's kind of like or I think it's not only in the world of Minecraft, or like in the specific gaming communities. It's also like in the art world, right? Like I'm thinking about when we like translate or like trying to bring this act of certain type of a labor inside of the art space. Like for example, I'm like thinking about sometimes like for working with institutions or museum, we never see people actually deinstall our work, like this kind of like an outsourced labor, and they just like happen and we got this box shipped back our work. We never know who actually deinstall, like taking care of the space, or who is actually maintaining the gallery space while the artists are not presented in the space. So I think this kind of like a idea of um, kind. I think it's really critical to thinking about it. Is like it's to understand. I think for me in my server or like in this work, I do like think a lot about like to really careful about like different contexts, or like very careful about how we actually talk about or illustrate or frame the labor of maintenance, or like labor of caring, or labor of construction, or labor of creation. I'm always like trying to be careful about it, or like trying to be critical about how we talk about it, because in different contexts they have totally different connotation. And I think that's kind of like related to what we are talking about, this kind of like a um chasing, even like this kind of like a fandom feeling towards the degraded digital spaces, or like kind of lack of care, or like a lack of kind of maintenance. But at the same time, I also kind of feel like it's really interesting because it's not about lack of care. It's about we actually care a lot about this kind of like a degradation or like this kind of like a destroy or like deconstruction or like. So I think it's really interesting. I don't have like a solid answer yet, but I think one thing I do think is really important is to just be really conscious about um, talking about issue like that and talking about the politicals of labor and care in different contexts, especially in digital space. I guess it's just um, it's just like everything since like the interface or like everything, the action, everything seems like so easy. Like for example, when I break the blocks, it's just like 1 second I can break multiple blocks, but like in real life, it's not like that. Or actually, it requires a lot of labor to do that. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's just yeah.
It's funny then to think of creative mode. Right now we're playing in creative mode, which means you have infinite resources and
Right.
infinite access to tools. Whereas in the non-creative mode, your you have finite resources. You have to harvest resources, and your tools break after a time. As well, it takes more than just one hit to take down a block. So it's funny thinking of this of non-creative mode being closer to real life for what it's like to maintain something or in an art practice.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It's just like this unlimited access, and almost like this really privileged standing point of like, okay, I can just like easily destroy everything here, and I can easily just break down stuff here, and I can break the stuff here. And I'm also thinking about, okay, how much access I actually have towards a server, right? Like, what I can do in a server, this kind of like it's about this kind of accessibility to no matter resources, or like almost like how much power do I have to destroy something. I think that's also really interesting to think about in especially in the context of Minecraft.
Um, I have a question or maybe another layer of the performance that I'm interested in that you kind of touched on as well with the thinking about the way that trying to return this landscape to its procedurally generated state
Hmm.
is you know like it won't actually return to that. It's going to be
Yeah.
you imitating it. So I'm wondering to what extent or if you think about this performance also as like a performance of you, but like by you of the algorithm, you know, like you could think of yourself sort of performing procedural generation in a way.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. Yeah, definitely I'm thinking about that. And it's all about this kind of like a simulation, right? Like and also like this character existing in the space already, it's like I'm like algorithm, and I'm living in this space and trying to simulate, or like trying to show that, or like trying to visualizing that kind of backstage situation. um I I think it's for me, I think it's really fascinating because like right now I actually so after this deconstruction of all the things I did, I will, like as Sarah said, I will restore the space based on like screenshot I took when I first entered the space, and just like gonna try my best to do that, but it's not gonna be the exact same thing, I believe. So just as I said previously in the previous questions, it's never about back to what it was. It almost becomes like bring it to a new, build a new world, build a new things. And this is I think that's, for me, that's fascinating to thinking. That's another way to like thinking about maintainers, or like thinking about taking care of, or like you're thinking about this idea of like deconstruction or this the installation in a digital space. Because yeah, as I said, it's like newly performed, newly simulated world. It's like I like perform, I'm not trying to trace back to the algorithm beforehand but it's like trying to create a new set of data, basically a new set of like digital information, or like a new set of like folders, files, all the things back. We cannot see it, and I think I'm performing that new part by trying to mimicking the past of it. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but I'm really excited about that. I think it's just offer me a kind of like new perspective to really thinking about this idea of like algorithmically procedurally generated landscape, or what's the meaning of that. And I think from in our previous, like in our opening or like in previous Ender Gallery's workshop, we've been talking about this idea of like how the physical impact of the digital space and how much things we're creating here we think it's like totally detached from the physical space, or like it's like not there at all, like everything just happening is like a vacuum space, but it's actually creating more and more things, like generate energy, like and generate like consume energy and generate like things occupying our physical space. I think that's also about I'm thinking I think for this performance, or like for this like last stage of my expression, I'm also thinking about that. It's like how much things it's I think is always there in this work, this like interaction between digital and the physical space, and how physical space bleeds into the digital space, as well as how the digital space is feeding into the physical space constantly.
Thanks, Huidi.
Mm-hmm.
Do we have any other questions? We've gone a little over our time plan.
Yeah, I think we can wrap up now. Thank you so much, Huidi, for the performance. And
thank you so much.
Yeah, all your work on the exhibition. For folks who still want to see the work, the server is still open. You can visit it live at ender.gallery/how-to-join, or that's where all the information to join is. And you can also watch, if you want to see it in its previous form, you can watch the videos from the exhibition opening that are online as well on YouTube. And other than that, I believe Huidi will continue to deconstruct this in various phases, so it's worth checking back in. So,
thank you.
Yes, thank you all so much for watching today and performing.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Have a good evening, everyone.